titled this video, 5 Ways to Make Your Table Saw Less Dangerous. I'm not calling it 5 ways to make your table saw safer because the table saw is not a safe tool. There are several hazards and dangers that come with using a table saw. And in this video, I'm going to talk about my 5 favorite ways of mitigating those dangers. Now, before we get started, I do want to make it very clear that I would really like this video to be more of a conversation. If you disagree with me, I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you think something is more important than what I have to offer here, I would love to hear about it. I think this is something that we should continually think about as woodworkers. So if you disagree with me, just put that down in the comments and I'll read it and I'll tell you what I think about it. And I would love to be challenged on this. First on my list are the safety features that actually came with the saw, and I'm really going to emphasize using a riving knife. I use one all the time. In fact, the only time I don't have a riving knife installed on this table is if I'm making a non-through cut like a dado or a groove or something like that. A couple of years ago, I switched to thin kerf blades, and the 2 riving knives that came with this saw were actually too thick for that blade. So I took one of those riving knives and I took it down to a machine shop and I had them make me a thinner riving knife out of stainless steel. And that's actually what I have installed right now. Now the purpose of that riving knife, whenever you rip cut a board, there's a natural tendency for that board to come back together once it's past the blade, and that natural tendency can pinch the back of the blade and give you some kickback, which you don't want. And that riving knife basically keeps your cut open so that board can't pinch the blade. And it's a very important piece of safety equipment. I always use it. They also make aftermarket splitters and different things, which I can't really attest to because I've always had riving knives on this saw. I've never used anything else. I consider that riving knife to be the most important safety feature that came with this saw. Number 2, do whatever it takes to make your saw easier to use. The harder you're having to work, the greater chance for injury and the greater chance that you're going to mess up your workpiece. So first and foremost, if you want to make your saw easier to use, be sure you use a good quality blade. I have a decent selection of Freud blades. That's what I've been using for the last couple of years, and I've become pretty partial to that brand. If your blade is having a difficult time making a cut, it either needs to be cleaned, sharpened, or maybe even replaced. If fighting a blade that doesn't want to cut, you are asking for problems. The other thing that can really make this saw a lot easier to use is some kind of outfeed support. Now you can use like some outfeed stands with like rollers or something of that nature. I prefer the outfeed table. I built this outfeed table several years ago, and I built it big enough to where I can actually rip cut an 8-foot sheet of plywood, and once I pass the blade, over half of that material is still on the table, so I've got plenty of support. And that's another thing, if you're fighting big sheet goods or whatever, and you don't have that support, you have to work that much harder, and you are asking for problems. Number 3, I think is pretty obvious, but we need to do whatever it takes to keep our fingers out of the blade. Now I have a couple of different aids here to help me with just that. This is a shop-built push stick. This is the gripper made by Micro Jig. I highly recommend this. This is very useful. I ordered this at Highland Woodworking. You can also keep your hands at a distance by using things like feather boards. Now, at what point do you consider your hands too close to the blade? I think that's kind of a personal decision. I tend to kind of straddle my rip fence as I push. As long as I have kind of 7 or 8 inches maybe, I feel pretty comfortable making this cut. There's other ways to keep distance between your fingers and that blade. Anytime I make a jig, I always try to incorporate some kind of hold down. Even my crosscut sled has little hold downs to where if I'm cutting a small piece, I can clamp it down, I can have my hands out here, push the sled forward, and my fingers are at a safe distance. Now, number 4 involves the material that I actually cut here at the table saw. Now, the table saw is not always the greatest option for initial cuts. Unfortunately, not all of us have a fully operational shop. Not everybody has access to a bandsaw. The bandsaw is where I take most of my initial rip cuts, especially if the stock that I just brought home is cupped or twisted. Once you rip that and you kind of relieve that pressure, the cutoff has a tendency to kind of bind up or fall. You never really know what's going to happen. It's unpredictable, and I don't like doing that here at the table saw because it can get in the blade and it can come back and see me. Number 5 is a don't. Never use your miter gauge and your rip fence at the same time. I've seen beginners try to do this where they're pushing with their miter gauge and they've got their rip fence set up, and basically what's going to happen is your cutoff is going to be trapped in between the saw blade and the fence, and there's a good chance it's going to come and see you. So you never want to do that. Now, the one thing I will use my fence for when I'm doing a cross cut, I will use it as a stop. I'll put this little auxiliary block right here on the fence, and then I can use this as a way of establishing a repeatable measurement. And so my workpiece will butt up against this. When I push it forward, it leaves plenty of room between the workpiece and that fence. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I really want this to be more of a conversation. If you agree with what I said here, great. If you don't agree, let me know what you don't agree with. If you've got any other tips or tricks or safety concerns that you have, go ahead and put that down in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. If you like this video, click on the like button. Be sure to subscribe to my channel for future content. And also go on over to rkwoodworking.com and check out my other woodworking related content. I hope to see you over there, and we'll see you next time.